I'm pregnant for my uncle. Story time. I grew up in a household headed by my mother. Despite her being single, she was very hardworking. Obviously, we know that in a house where you only have a single mother, most of our mothers then were not educated. My mother wasn't working, she wasn't formally employed, but she would sell seasonal fruits at the market, and through this, she would fend for us. Because I saw how hard life was for me and my mother and everyone else who she kept at home, I made sure I worked extremely hard in school. And I was a very brilliant student. I was an A+ student in school, and I managed to get 6 points at grade 12. For those who are not in Zambia, 6 points at grade 12 is like the best mark you can get. It's like the highest grade. Of course, my good grades managed to earn me a bursary at one of the highest institutions in the country, and just like that, I went into uni. I couldn't afford living in the hostels because it was quite expensive and I wasn't given accommodation. My mother managed to rent me a boarding house where I was living with other girls. This boarding house was the beginning of the drama in my life. Most of my friends living at the boarding house were from humble backgrounds just like me. Eventually, some of the girls started getting sugar daddies, as was common then. These sugar daddies would help pay their rent. Of course, my mom would delay sometimes to pay my rent, but she never missed. Because of the delays that my mom would have with paying my boarding house fees, the landlord and I were always in problems. After my friends saw this, the ones with sugar daddy started suggesting that I could get a sugar daddy and life would be easy. And for sure, my friends did have an easy life. They were managing to live above and beyond their means. When this was suggested to me, oftentimes I would say no. I would always say no, and this conversation would actually upset me because I come from a home where my parents were divorced due to this thing of sugar daddies. My mother caught my father cheating, and this is how their marriage ended. So I always told myself I would never do anything like that. Lo and behold, a day came and I was supposed to pay my rentals because rentals were always an issue. Remember, I was on bursary. A day came when I was supposed to pay my rentals, and my landlord that day was very upset with me because I had been, paying late. I had never missed, but I was paying quite late. So my landlord told me that I had to move out that day. That day is the day I chose to take a path in life that I still regret. I talked to my mother and explained how my landlord was giving me an issue and he wanted his rent that day. Of course, my mother didn't have. There's no way she could get money on spot. And at that point, seasonal fruits were not really in season, so business was quite slow for her. She tried everything she could. She tried to borrow the money from her friends, but no one could help. No one could come to her aid. So that day, when my friend saw how I struggled to pay rent that day, and my landlord was saying that he would chase me out, she suggested that there was a man who had been looking at me and he liked me, the friend to her sugar daddy, we'll call him Mr. Zach. So she told me how Mr. Zach really liked me, but she was scared to suggest it to me because I always mentioned how that was not my lifestyle. She told me actually if I were to say yes to Mr. Zach that day, he's willing to give me the money for rent and some for upkeep. From home, I knew that the way out of the poverty we were facing at home was to be educated, and I was really desperate for my education. So on this day, I eventually said yes to my friend's suggestion. For sure, after accepting my friend's offer, she gave me his number and she also gave him my number, and I waited for his call. Lo and behold, I saw a notification on my Airtel money and it was the payment for my rent and a little bit more. Upon seeing this money, I was excited that I would pay rent and I wouldn't have to quit school. But also, I knew I had to pay handsomely for this. That day, Mr. Zach and I don't talk. The only thing is, I sent him a message saying thank you, and he responds, "You're welcome, baby girl." This feels very weird being called baby girl by an old man because she showed me his picture before I even accepted the money. And she told me, obviously, I had to date him. So he responds, "You're welcome, baby girl." It feels very weird, but you would expect the following day he comes to see me at my boarding house. When we meet, he seems gentle and sweet, but obviously he will be sweet. Just like that, and that's the beginning of my relationship with this old man. The main problem I had with him is he wanted exclusivity, so he demanded that I break up with my then boyfriend, which I did because this man at this point was already sponsoring my life. I was no longer calling home as much to ask for money. He was covering all my needs. A few months down the line, this man is very jealous. He doesn't want to hear me talk to anyone else, anyone who seems like a male, or anyone who discusses religion, nothing. He makes sure that I belong to him in all aspects, financially, emotionally, spiritually. He didn't want me to associate myself with anything that dealt with religion. I had to oblige. Don't forget to register for my classes, and if you want to book me for makeup and hair, the number is always in my bio. When I started seeing this man, he told me that he had a wife and kids. Actually, his kid was at a university that was next to my university, and honestly, I became so rebellious at this point that this didn't bother me as long as this man gave me what I wanted and he got what he wanted from me. Of course, it's like I was his mini wife. Bear in mind, when we started, he mentioned that he was married. Again, it didn't bother me. He eventually started having problems at home, and his wife knew about me. She confronted me many times, but I didn't listen. A few months down the line, he and this man are obviously intimate and were doing everything that he's supposed to be doing with only his wife. Of course, I fall pregnant, and this breaks all hell loose for me. I discover that I'm pregnant on my holiday at home. How I discover, actually, it's my aunt who discovers it first, not even me. Remember, I'm still very young. I'm about 21 at this point. My aunt suspected it first that I was pregnant, and for sure we did a test and I was definitely pregnant. Before she could tell my mom, she told me to tell her who was responsible, and we see how we'd get that person to come on board and come home, pay for damages and everything like that, and see if this man wanted to settle with me. This is nerve-wracking because we're talking about a married man. But because I was very close to my aunt, I tell her everything, that I have been dealing with a married man while at school. She's obviously disappointed and devastated, but she asked for a picture of this man. Yikes. So of course I show her a picture of this man, and immediately the shock in her face, like there's a pin drop silence in the room. Immediately she tells me, like, Fatima, are you telling me you didn't know that this man is your uncle? Guys, like, my legs are shivering at this point. I feel cold and I feel so sick. She tells me this man is actually my uncle, my cousin who I live with, that we've taken into our home. Obviously, I know she's my cousin. My aunt told me she's her sister's child, and her sister passed a long time. She died during childbirth. So this child that she left is daughter for the man that I'm pregnant for. Let me get this clear for you. So he is my uncle, meaning Mr. Zach is my uncle. He was married to my mom's late sister. Then after the death of my aunt, this man went MIA on his child. So my mom took in my aunt's child, her sister's child, and we started living with her. But this man has been MIA, and this man is Mr. Zach. So at this point, it's official that I'm pregnant for my uncle. Everyone in the family finds out because you can't hide such a thing. So honestly, I don't know what to do. Guys, our good sis is asking for advice because now she quits school, because obviously how does she continue? She's pregnant and everyone in the family is embarrassed of her. Her mom actually chases her out of the house to go live with her grandmother. And this is the end of her education. Remember, she comes from a poor background. This was the only way that she could salvage her life. So this is just advice. Ladies, let's stop this thing of sugar daddies. We're ruining homes. We are ladies, one day we'll have our own home. We can't condone this anymore. Don't make it normal. It's not normal to have a sugar daddy. Fend for yourself. Whatever you can afford is enough for you. If you can't afford it, then it's not yours, at least not at that point. A man doesn't have to buy it for you. Men also, take care of your homes. You don't need these young girls. You're ruining your lives and the lives of your children. Love you. Bye.